There are 5 types of AI models, but in practice, you probably only need 2. And the one most people are overpaying for is not the one you think. Most advice about AI models is written for developers or coders, not fully experienced professional with 20 years into their career who just wants to know what's worth paying for. Not to build apps, just to do their actual work better. If that's you, a consultant, a director, a senior professional, stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know which type of model fits your work, which ones you can stop paying for, and one platform that lets you try most of them without separate descriptions. And I'll give you a demo of that towards the end. Let me tell you about a conversation I had recently. I was working with an operations director. She was personally paying for 5 AI subscriptions. Her team had another 6. I asked her to explain what each one actually did. She could clearly explain 2 of those. The rest, free trials, things that she was experimenting with, tools a colleague recommended, and 2 across the board were subscriptions she had totally forgotten about. Literally hundreds of dollars a month. And she wasn't even sure any of it was making her better at her job. I want to come back to her story later because it perfectly explains why understanding the categories of AI models matters so much. By the end of this video, you'll understand every type of AI model in plain language, what each one is for, when it's worth paying for, and when it isn't. New models appear all the time, almost certainly monthly. Claude has recently dropped 4.6 versions of Opus and Sonnet. OpenAI dropped 5.3, and then the next day 5.4. Google continues, Grok continues. The landscape keeps shifting, and it's accelerating. If you try to track every new release, you'll spend all your time evaluating tools and none of it building capability. What you actually need is a simple way to categorize them. So when a new model appears, you immediately know where it fits. Most explainers compare models by using benchmarks. That's useful if you're a developer, but if you're a professional deciding what's worth your time and money, it's almost useless. You don't care if it performs a little bit better, a little bit faster. Your real question is this: what kind of work am I trying to improve? And which category of model is designed for that work? AI doesn't replace your thinking. It shouldn't. It amplifies it. And particularly when you've got decades of experience. In a future video, I'm going to explain what I call the experience advantage, how decades of professional expertise become the thing that actually makes AI, and more importantly, you, more powerful. For now, think about AI models like hiring people. You wouldn't hire a strategy consultant to do data entry, and you wouldn't give a graduate intern the board presentation. AI models work the same way. Essentially, there are 3 main tiers, 3 levels of hire. First, let's call them the flagships. These are your senior consultants or your C-level type AI models. These are models like the latest from OpenAI, Claude Opus, their thinking model, Gemini Pro, and of course Grok. These are the 4 main ones, but there are others. These are built for complex reasoning, multi-step analysis, and high-stakes decision. They are the most powerful, but often they are the more slower models, or the slowest and more expensive. Using a flagship model to draft a routine email is like hiring McKinsey to update a spreadsheet. Next, let's look at the mid-tier models. These are your workhorses. Models like Claude Sonnet and versions of Gemini Flash. These handle drafting, summarizing, and analysis research. And for most professional people, the work results that they deliver are indistinguishable from the flagships, but they're much faster and they're much cheaper. In reality, about 80% of your usage probably should live in this tier. Then we have the light models. Let's think of these as interns. Models like GPT-4o Mini. They're built for speed and volume, really quick summarizing, reading reports before meetings for a quick summary. They're extremely fast and they're extremely cheap. Most people do start with a flagship model, not because they need one, but because it was the first tool that really worked. They sign up, it works well, and they never question it thereafter. Then a colleague recommends something, a free trial, a tool that absolutely is amazing. Within a year, you'll have 4 or 5 subscriptions and a real depth in none of them. Imagine a consultant or yourself using your model every day for 6 months. Your prompts will get sharper. The outputs will get better, not because the model changed, but because 20 years of your domain knowledge combined with consistent use of one tool creates real leverage. That kind of capability doesn't happen across 5 platforms. Now let's return to the operations director. When we mapped her tools across the model spectrum, something interesting appeared. A flagship model was being used for routine emails. 2 mid-tier tools doing exactly the same job. And a specialist tool she used twice, and a light model she had forgotten about completely. She hadn't chosen badly. She had simply never asked, what tier is this tool and what's it best suited for? And do I already have this capability covered and I'm not using it within my current subscription? Beyond the 3 tiers we've just talked about, there are actually 2 more categories. Categories that most AI advice completely ignores. First, specialists. Think of these as domain experts, tools for specific research, legal analysis tools, financial modeling tools, scientific literature search. They do one thing extremely well, worth paying for if you use them regularly within your work. And then finally, the last category are open source models. Think of these as your in-house AI team. These are models like Llama, maybe Mistral or Kimi. These models, or the previous models we've discussed, run on somebody else's servers. Open source models can run on your own infrastructure or even your own computer. Your data never leaves. So if it's extremely sensitive information or very confidential, you might want to consider that. And in a later video, we will tell you how to set up one of those, and I'll walk you through step by step. Now, here's where things can get tricky. Understanding the 5 categories is easy, but acting on them is where people get stuck, because the instinct is always to optimize, to always try a new tool, the shiny object syndrome, a flagship for this, a mid-tier for that, a specialist for something else. And suddenly you're back to 6 subscriptions with no understanding of how to optimize and get the best out of the model that you've chosen. You do understand the categories, but you've ended up with the same problem: breadth without depth. And with experience and the right choice of model, we're talking about taking you to a whole new level. So think of these categories. They exist for understanding, but they're not a shopping list. One of the things I want to cover in a later video also is how we go about selecting that. And you know, the operations director fell exactly into this trap. Her first instinct was to build the perfect AI stack. One tool for each category. perfectly matched. So I asked her a simple question. How many tools will you actually use deeply enough to build real capability? She thought for a moment and said honestly, 2, maybe 2. And that's the answer for most professionals. Tools used with a genuine depth, where your domain knowledge and tools capability compound over time, will make you unbeatable and an expert beyond your wildest dreams. Everything else is a subscription you're paying for, but not truly using. Let me repeat that. Everything else is a subscription you're paying for, but not truly using. So here's the principle. Very simple. I call it the 2-tool rule. 5 categories to understand: flagship, mid-tier, light, specialist, and open source. That's your mental model. But only 2 tools to actually pay for. Coming back to the operations director, she cancelled 3 subscriptions that evening. She kept 1 model for mid-tier daily work and added a specialist research tool for competitive intelligence. I went back 3 months later and her workflow has changed dramatically. Her prompts were sharper. The outputs were way better. There was depth in what she was getting out of those models because she had trained them over those months. And it wasn't because the model changed, because she had gone deep enough for her expertise and the tool's capability to start compounding. Please don't forget that. She put it very simply. I stopped trying everything and I started getting good at something. Here's one simple action you can take this week. List every AI tool you're paying for in one place. Put them on a spreadsheet, write them down. Place each one into the 5 categories and ask yourself, do I have duplicates? Which tool am I actually going deep with? Cancel the duplicates, commit to one for 90 days. New models will keep appearing. The categories won't change, and the real truth won't change either. The tool is downstream of your thinking, and the thinking is downstream of the depth that you bring. Your domain expertise multiplied by AI capability. That's where the real leverage is. Before I finish, I promise something practical. Now, this is quite a unique tool and it's very strong in research. One of the reasons is because it does give a comprehensive list of resources or reference as it goes about its search. This tool is Perplexity, 1 subscription. Now, the beauty of this is inside you can access many models without having to pay for any additional subscriptions. You can access Claude, you can access OpenAI and Gemini. If you want to experiment before committing to a platform, it's a very good place to start. If this kind of thinking is useful, I write a weekly piece that goes deeper into the topics like this. The link will be in the description. I'm Jim Kennedy, and I'll see you next week.